Hello again. Nini White here, your host of the Big Picture Social Emotional Learning Podcast, where every episode is focused in one way or another on providing you with insights and resources for nurturing kids' social emotional learning, as well as their all-around life skills development. This podcast exists because we see the range of social emotional learning extending far beyond merely helping kids to learn the most obvious elements of their social and emotional well-being. This podcast exists because we want to connect with other educators and caregivers and families who appreciate the true worth of each kid from day one. Because kids bring so much, and it really is up to us to evoke and nurture their latent sensibilities and talents and potential, while doing so with a feet on the ground respect for the fact that there's always more going on inside young children's hearts and minds than the world tends to acknowledge or even allow for. So please consider this: how we see the kids in our care, whether they're in our classroom, our after-school facility, our home, how we see them determines how much they can grow and develop as a result of our influence. On that note, I love and appreciate the following words of wisdom from Kahlil Gibran, a time-honored prophet from the 1800s. And if you resonate with these words, then this podcast is designed for you, for your intentions to bring maximum nurturing benefits to the children in your world by doing your best to take care with how you see, how you perceive, how you interpret the kids in your care. Kahlil Gibran wrote, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backwards, nor tarries with yesterday." People often ask me why I've created this podcast. My answer is pretty much the same as the reason any of us create anything. I couldn't find it anywhere else, no matter how hard I looked. And what I was looking for is wide-ranging answers to problems that will have far-reaching implications for the future of today's youth. Because unless we get really intentional about activating far-reaching solutions in the present, right now, for our kids, their futures will be so much more difficult and less fulfilling than they have to be. We just need to set them up with life skills that serve their development beyond what we can even imagine their futures might encompass, which means we've got to give them skills for problem solving more than telling them how to solve their current sets of problems and challenges. Although we can do that too, but still we've got to give them problem solving skills. Social emotional learning, along with life skills development, provides the most natural foundation upon which kids can exercise their innate ability to right wrongs, to apply logic to faulty premises, to check in with their own finer instincts to reverse inconsistencies, and so much more. When we succeed at engaging kids with a wide angle lens on situations and challenges that matter to them, that are 100% relevant to them, we might very well be redirecting their futures to brighter outcomes. So that is why I am here, because like you, I care. And like you, I know we can make a real difference with the right understanding and the right kinds of approaches that both kids and adult educators can relate to as real and true. So this podcast, the Big Picture Social Emotional Learning Podcast, is about curating those kinds of approaches, the ones that kids and adults both can recognize as smart, uncomplicated, fair-minded, reasonable, impartial, honest, humane, trustworthy, and most importantly, always to me, is that they be respectful to all, respectful to everyone's intelligence and sensibilities. Now, I want to make sure you and I are on the same page about why I use the word big picture to imply what this podcast will encompass. So here are some directions that future conversations with educators will be taking, directions you may or may not be getting from other social emotional learning podcasts. Because I live in the United States, as do many of this podcast's listeners, and because yesterday, May 24th, 2022, there was yet another school shooting in which this time 19 young children were gunned down, we will revisit this very difficult topic. There are, of course, so many emotions that arise after one of these incidents, in addition to fear and horror. And helping students to feel what they feel without getting buried by those feelings is something we are going to have to help them to do, whether we feel up to the task or not. We also must, as mentioned earlier, prepare the youth in our care, steer the youth in our care towards their brightest possible futures, which requires preemptive solving, looking at problems and challenges through a multifaceted lens for multidimensional solutions and responses, so that maybe these kids that grow up to be shooters grow up in a different way. I really have to say that I think that that is a great deal the adult's responsibility, that we need to be keeping our eyes on the kids that are drifting away from us. And we need to start doing that at the very earliest ages. So that is one thing we will be looking at in this podcast. I'll also be talking with a kindergarten teacher who has written a book for kids about a family member getting cancer. Another very difficult topic. What happens when kids aren't drawn into safe conversations around difficult topics? We know their imaginations take over, most often leading them into inaccurate or incomplete conclusions that can affect their lives for a long, long time. So let's keep those lines of communication open with young kids while making it easier for adults too. But not just talking at them, not just telling them what to think. We've got to be prepared to enter into difficult conversations with kids, which means we really need to exercise our own listening and being present skills. Sex is another topic from which we mustn't shy away. Instead, we will do our best to give you some good info about what's happening around the world on this universally relevant subject, including the well-researched effects of widely varying approaches across cultures and countries. You're probably not in a position, or even want to be in a position to offer sex ed to kids, but having some awareness of how that topic is managed around the world is something that you might want to consider. Since sex, body awareness, others' bodies are all in kids' awareness to one degree or another, even in their earliest years. I do not have to tell you that. And then there will be episodes that are totally lighthearted, pretty much guaranteed to leave you with a big smile. One that's uploading soon is from an award-winning musician who is adored by kids and who gets them singing songs that bring home meaningful messages that make their lives and their friendships happier. On this podcast, we'll also share conversations about equity and racial justice from different angles and perspectives, because this is an area of human interactions that's definitely multifaceted. One size does not fit all. This element of social and emotional development deserves our eyes, our ears, our hearts, and our minds. And I'm not saying that figuratively, I'm saying it literally, from as many different angles as we can bring in order to gain true understanding and respect for the scope of impact that race and equity encompass. Thinking skills, reasoning skills, critical thinking skills. Do you think the world could use more of those skills? The way that misinformation has spread so widely, causing so much chaos and mistrust and polarizing of different people in our communities and in our country, it all makes me certain that much more emphasis needs to be placed on these skills. I see thinking skills relating to lives that are more balanced, less fear-based, and ultimately more successful, all of which definitely relates to social emotional learning and development. I hope you agree with me on that. Children's education and development require instruction and then guidance, of course. What they also need is lots of exercise and actual thinking, reasoning, decision-making, discerning, actually using their own individual and collaborative mental powers. And the best way we can help with that dimension of their development is by inviting them into discussion, conversation, dialogue that is mutually respectful, with a sincere intent on our side to connect with each child by asking questions and introducing ideas that help them to follow along logical paths of discovery, by asking them questions that are a little bit challenging, never closed-ended, and that always communicate your true openness to the fact that they will bring next level insights, next level intelligence, intuition, wisdom, and more if we are open to it. Reminded again about the Kahlil Gibran quote I referenced a little earlier. So welcome again to this overview of season 2 of the Big Picture Social Emotional Learning Podcast. Thank you for being here.